So Jim, thank you very much for joining us on One Cap Wonders. I won't take up too much of your time as I know you're in the international break. But I suppose the first question is very simple. If football wasn't an option, was there something else that Jim Goodwin would have done?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, growing up, the dream was just like a lot of young boys and girls out there now, was to become a professional footballer. And I was always, adamant that that's the road I was going to go down. And I've got three brothers and a sister, and I do remember those conversations with me mother and father back in the day, where what are you going to be when you grow up? And my three brothers were given relatively sensible answers about teachers and maybe being the guard, and somebody else wanted to be a fireman, I think, and I said I wanted to play football. And my mother said to me that that's fine, but what do you really want to do? Like, what's the serious job you
Yeah.
want to do? So I don't really know, to be honest. I think I would definitely have went traveling. A lot of my friends are, over in Australia. Some of them claim citizenship over there. I certainly would have went and done that kind of thing. And whether I would have settled in a country like that or not, I don't know. Um, but yeah, I was okay at school. I mean, I got decent grades, and I quite enjoyed my period at school. And but it's hard to say. Really, it's hard to say. I liked maths and finance and things like that. So maybe somewhere down that kind of avenue.
I remember I asked Chris Sutton this question in season one, and he said he would have ended up as a civil servant, and he almost did.
Oh, really?
He was involved at was it Norfolk Council or something like that.
Right.
And his dad was a teacher, having been a professional football player, and he was actively encouraged to go into the civil service. I think he did the exams and everything. So
Really?
you know,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one thing, I came over and I left home in 96, and, obviously got the opportunity to go to Celtic, and John O'Shea was given the opportunity to come to Celtic as well. And obviously, opted to go to Manchester United. But one of the agreements with United was that he finishes off his schooling, and I think John was a year ahead of me in school and had a leaving cert and things coming up. And United were very patient with him and encouraged him to go and finish um, his exams. And John done really well, and I think that's probably something that's football has certainly got better at, in terms of recognizing the fact that not every young player is going to go on and make a living in the game, and how do we make sure that they've got a future outside of football. And that's probably one regret that I do have, because, as I said, I enjoyed school. I wasn't, I'd done okay, and probably wish now that I had, with all that spare time I had after training, wish I had kind of knuckled down and got a degree in something. And I look at a lot of players now. Even when I was at St Mirren as manager, my captain Joe Shaughnessy, he was in the middle of doing a degree, actually, and often after training would sit in the canteen and go through the books. And he graduated there actually last year. And he's got his teaching qualifications now. So I think it's a great thing that players are starting to recognize the fact that there is a lot of life left after football, and it's really important to be prepared. And I think football clubs are doing more with that as well, which is encouraging.
you were lucky you didn't have to fall back on anything. There was no injuries like Nicky Byrne. He didn't have to go join Westlife in the late 90s or that kind of thing. You were although you had injuries, you were lucky that you did make it and you had a fantastic career. But internationally, you were the peak of underage football. Like looking back on that under 16 championship, that must really have kind of shown your family that you were able for this level, even at that young age.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great crop of players, that generation that was coming through. A number of them, went on to have fantastic careers, and quite a few of them are still involved in the game at a high level. And obviously, John O'Shea, probably the highest profile of us all at that age group, to went on and had a hugely successful career that the rest of us could only ever have dreamed of. And delighted to see John still involved now with the FAI, and a very good appointment, I think, for the new manager, to have someone with John's experience and the respect that I'm sure he would garner from the the players there as well, and to have him on board. Really, really pleased for him. I met him a few weeks ago when we were in Manchester for a pre-season training camp, and had a coffee with him, and he was in caretaker charge at the time. But I think it's a shrewd move by the FAI to keep him involved, and delighted that John has agreed to do that. But yeah, I mean, look, what the year we won the under 16s, we were all very, very young and at the early stage of our careers, and I had just signed a 2-year contract with Celtic. But you know, it's probably the first 3 or 4 years in the professional environment is the bit that's going to make you or break you. And I found that out very early on at Celtic. There was some terrific players within the group that I joined, and I felt quite out of place initially because I was never the most technical of players. I was an old-fashioned centre half, if you like. Enjoyed defending. Had that bit of aggression in my game from coming down the country in Ireland where you grow up playing the ga, and I took that into my football, and thankfully it paid off. But that is still one of the fondest memories that I do have, and I can remember the fortnight that we were in Scotland. I can remember it vividly now. 27 years on, I can remember the whole build up to it. We actually won the final in McDiarmid Park, which is a stadium that I've played numerous games in now during my time in Scotland. Obviously, the home of St Johnstone. So yeah, there was a lot of significant memories. There was actually, a few months before we had went to play in the tournament. There was that terrible Dunblane massacre, if you remember. And we actually were staying in the Dunblane Hydro, and we went up to the graveyards, and I can just remember that type of thing very clearly in my mind, and there was a lot of emotion around the place at the time, and yeah, it was a great outcome for us, obviously. And as I said, those players that were in that squad, who went on to have great success in their careers, and some of them now not involved in football, that have went on to have good success outside the game as well, which is really, really pleasing.
What you've had more than any is you've had longevity. Like as a player, you have constantly, you might have taken one step back, but then you took 2 steps forward. And the same as a manager, you've constantly kept going. How, when you look back over those days when you left Celtic and you went down to League One in England, and then worked your way all the way back up to being a title-winning captain with St Mirren, what were those years like? Because I can't imagine they were easy, because you never really knew where you were going to go, and then there was injuries in the middle of it, and you just kept you never gave up on it.
I've always been able to accept criticism from a very young age, and I've never really been affected greatly by other people's opinions. I've always, it's very hard to put your finger on it and try and explain it to people, but I've always had that self-belief and that bit of inner confidence, I think, that you need, regardless of what some managers might say to you, because I've had plenty of knocks along the way, plenty of managers that have told me I'm not good enough and I'm not part of their plans, um, and you just have to accept that, and take it that that's just part of the game. But I see some players really affected by the negativity even now in the modern day game. I think it's even more so because of the impact of social media. A lot of young lads go online and read negative criticism, and it really does have a significant impact on their confidence, and it affects them greatly. So my advice to all those players, particularly in my squad anyway, is just don't go on it and don't pay attention to it. I know that's easier for me to say because it wasn't really a significant part of my growing up, social media. And these guys are, born with it pretty much. They've got a hand in their, a phone in their hand from a very young age, and it's what they know nowadays. But, you have to have some kind of resilience in this game to survive. And even now at, the stage that I'm at, and, managing, the criticism is always there, and whether it's journalists, whether it's opposition fans, or whether it's your own supporters, that criticism is always going to come. So the great cliche, not get too high during those good times and not get too low either when things aren't going so well. And I think that's just something that I've been very fortunate to have in my makeup from a very young age. I don't know whether it's an arrogance or a confidence or what, but it certainly served me well. And it's got me this far, and I've been, I think, very fortunate to have earned, a decent living doing something that I absolutely love doing.
When did your mother realize this was real, Jim?
Oh, well, she probably knew that from a very young age, I would say. Yeah, I was always, just had that self-belief, I think, that I just, as I said to you at the beginning, when I was 10 years old, I think I was, when she asked me that question about what are you going to be when you're older, and I told her I was going to be a footballer, and she said, no, but what real job are you going to do? So I don't know where that comes from. It's very hard to put your finger on it. But don't get me wrong, it hasn't been easy. It takes a lot of hard work, takes a lot of commitment. You make a hell of a lot of sacrifices. You miss out on a lot of big occasions back home, whether it's birthdays and weddings and Christmas time. Christmas is my favorite time of year. A really special time in my house growing up. My mother really made a big deal about it. And as I said, I'm from a relatively, big family with three brothers and a sister, and obviously my mum and dad. So, we were a very family orientated house, and missing out on those kind of occasions as you're growing up away from home is difficult, but I think it does strengthen you and it makes you a stronger character. And yeah, I've just learned that that's part and parcel of it.
And what would you say has been that the highest high and also maybe the lowest low, looking back?
From a playing perspective, you know, when I was growing up, I think I was very, very lucky to have the kind of success that we had in '96 with the Irish team, the first team ever in Ireland's history to win a major tournament. And then, for Brian Kerr to follow that up so quickly afterwards with the under-18s. It was a remarkable achievement from Brian and Noel O'Reilly, God rest him. So I think when you're young, you take those moments for granted. Playing in all of the age groups with the Irish teams was great as well. The highlight of my early parts of my career was always waiting for that letter to come through to Celtic to say that you're in the squad, because you really looked forward to those moments of representing the country. I made my debut for Celtic when I was 18, and then obviously, got the reason why we're having the conversation, the Irish cap at 21. So I think I had a lot of real positive things happening so early, and I think that was very fortunate on my part. And then I suppose the negative points come then a little bit later, where I've got to make a big decision about, do I stay at Celtic or do I leave? I knew I was never going to be good enough to play for Martin O'Neill's Celtic team at the time, and so opted to go down south, down to England, down to Stockport. And I've had moments of injury. That's always a big part of any professional athlete's career. That can test you mentally. And I've broken my ankle, I've had a fractured skull, I've had far too many months on the sidelines with different injuries and different bits and pieces. So, they're definitely low points in anybody's career. I've had relegations, I've had promotions, I've won a cup, as you alluded to there, with St Mirren as captain. So I think it's been a really good adventure from when I think back to 1996 when I left home. I can remember that day like it was yesterday, in the driveway, and my mother crying at the front door and my father driving me up to Dublin airport, and me with butterflies and nerves and everything going through me, every emotion you can think of, excited and sad at the same time. So, to have had, 27 years in this game, I just think it's a real blessing. And I'm, so grateful to still be earning a living in this great game. And I sometimes think I'm the luckiest man alive, because I've been given so many opportunities from so many different people, whether it's managers or chairmen at different clubs. And yeah, I just seem to land on my feet at every turn. So surely that can't last forever.
You never know. You never know. Going back to your cap, what was that like Well, to get, because there weren't WhatsApps back then, so to know that you were getting called up and then to come on to play for your country, it is everyone's dream. Um, and having already done it underage, what was it? What was the senior cap like?
Yeah, but the funny thing about my senior cap was I was never, I was traveling with the under 21s team, and it was a friendly, and we had an under 21s friendly followed the following evening by the senior game. And so we always tended to play a day or two before the senior lads, and then we would go and watch their game, and then we'd all jump back onto the same flight and head back to Dublin, and then we'd all go our separate ways. But um, I played really well in the under 21s the night before, and Mick McCarthy was at the game, and I think Taff was there as well as assistant manager. And we won the game. We kept a clean sheet. As I said, I'd had a particularly good individual performance, and was very pleased with myself after the game. Going back to the hotel, and we all ate in the same area in the hotel, and it was quite a strange and surreal moment when Mick McCarthy came up behind me in the queue and told me that I would be in the squad the following evening. So, I was obviously really taken aback because I hadn't heard of that type of thing happening, before, and I just assumed it was a little pat on the back for what was a good performance that evening, and never thought for a moment that I would be on the bench or get a jersey or anything like that. I was just very excited at the fact that I was going to be traveling on the senior bus the next night. And when I got to the dressing room, um, obviously there was no names on the jerseys back then. It was just a number. And, like I said, I didn't expect to get a jersey. I thought there was 22 players in the squad and, I wasn't going to be included. And, the kitman told me I was where to sit, and I had a jersey. So that was the biggest reward for me of the trip, was the thought that, I'm going to go home here with one of the senior jerseys and they always have the stitched into the crest, the date and the game. And I'm thinking, well, what a great memento from this trip to Finland. At least I've got this to go home with. I never for 1 minute thought I'd be going home with a senior cap as well. And so I was on the bench, and the game was quite comfortable. The lads were doing well. Ireland had a strong team at the time. And with about 20 minutes to go, Mick turned around and told me to get warmed up, and along with Graham Barrett, I think, as well. And I thought there was no way in the world I'm going to come on here. And then, he did. He told me I was going on. The strangest part about the whole thing probably was I was coming on in replace of Robbie Keane. So I'm standing on the touchline thinking, Mick does know I'm a centre half here and not a centre forward. And you mentioned Chris Sutton earlier. I remember Chris Sutton during his time at Celtic. Martin O'Neill would sometimes use him as centre half when lads were injured, and he would always play there with a cigar out half the time. He was probably nearly as good at centre half as what he was at centre forward. But anyway, they shuffled the pack around a little bit. I came on for Robbie, who obviously an Irish hero in a lot of people's eyes, and his goal scoring record for the country is incredible. And I just slotted in a centre half, played out the last. I think it might have been 12 minutes. I think with extra time and added on time, it might have been 15 minutes. But it was just the proudest moment of my career. Every young lad growing up wants to represent their country, and I was no different. And I could never understand. When you hear fellas pulling out of international squads with injuries, when fine well, they're going to be fine to play for their club the following week. They just fancy a few days in Dubai or whatever with the wife. For me, that was never, if I was given the opportunity to play for Ireland, you'd walk over a broken glass to get there to make sure that you got that cap. So, it was an extremely surreal and very, very proud moment, and couldn't wait to make the call to the family back home after the game to tell them that I made my senior debut for the country. So it was great.
And now that you have a little bit of time to reflect, even though you probably don't get a huge amount of time to reflect on these things, do you think all of these experiences are now equipping you to equip so many younger generations who are going to get that first call, who are going to be in the situations that you were in, who are going to be undecided and feeling pressure because you've had the most circuitous career that's had such great highs and such challenging lows, but that equips you in a way that other managers maybe aren't to support young players and develop young players.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think you have to look back on moments in your career, and it's more often than not, you spend more time thinking about the challenging moments. I think that's probably just life in general. When things are going well, we don't really think a great deal about anything. We just move from one moment to the next. But then when, things become a little bit more challenging, then we really start to analyze situations, and whether it's football or just, normal everyday life, we forget to sometimes look back on the good times and remember the good moments and reflect. And yeah, sometimes I do. I enjoy the conversations with ex players when we meet them, and the odd time we get together. But you know, I think what myself and John O'Shea probably done coming from the southeast of Ireland. When we were growing up, there was we really struggled to compete with the Dublin clubs in particular. I think everybody in the country did. There was obviously bigger population of players, probably a more significant investment in the grassroots in those clubs as well, and we were very much considered a GA community, and soccer wasn't their number one sport. So I hope what myself and John achieved at an early age gave a little bit of inspiration maybe to the lads back at my home club Tramore AFC, and to John's people in Ferrybank, and obviously he played for Bohemians as well. Hopefully it gave them a little bit of a shot in the arm to think that, well, if these two lads from down the country can go on and make it as a professional player and play for their countries, then why can't I? And I'm delighted to see. And I was just home there at the weekend, and as I was, before I even got to my house to see my mother and father, I was driving by the Tramore ground, and there was a game going on. And I pulled in the car and went in to watch the second half of the Tramore Premier team. And they were, my friend actually, Lee Quilty, is the manager there now. And they won comfortably, I'm glad to say. They won 5-0 in the end. But the setup down there now from the one that I left in 96, the investment that's been made, the money that has trickled down the country, from the FAI and from the government, and the investment that the country as a whole has made in grassroots soccer, has been fantastic. And it's great to see all these really good, well-run clubs down the country as well now that are producing really good young talented players for Ireland. And you see a number of them now going across the sea and making great careers for themselves. So, I always think about that time at Tramore as well. And I'm very, very lucky to have grown up in such a great town, that I definitely took for granted when I was younger. And it was only yesterday I was walking the beach with my father, and telling him that the place gets better and nicer and nicer every time I come back, because I think when you get older you do appreciate those good things more. And I love going home, and I love popping into Tramore AFC when I can to see all of those great people that really helped me on my journey, and great coaches. We were taught good manners from an early age, respect, discipline, and I've carried that through with me, right through to this latter stage now in my managerial career. And there's nothing better. You spoke about the young players. There's nothing better than being able to relay that advice onto them, and when they are going through difficult moments, to be able to let them know that I understand what they're feeling. Because I've played at clubs in the past where I was never always that first pick in the team. I had to fight hard. I was a squad player sometimes. I had to keep myself fit, and make sure when the opportunity came that I took it. And so it's good, I think, and it's certainly valuable tool for me to have, to be able to um, help these guys during those moments.
And before we finish up, it's not over yet. You're still young. If you were Italian, you'd still be playing in Serie B.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was always one of my ambitions as a player was to try and play until I was 40. I was at Scunthorpe United with a guy called Peter Beagrie, who I'm pretty sure the viewers and the listeners will know who I'm talking about. He played for Bradford in the Premier League and had a good career, down in England. And Biggs was 41, I think, when he was playing with Scunthorpe. And I kind of looked at him, and I would have been about 20, maybe 3 or 4 at the time, and I thought, there's no reason why I can't play till I'm 40. Fitness was always something that I had. I was blessed from a young age, being a good runner and things like that. As I said to you, technical ability was something that I wasn't particularly gifted with, but I always prided myself on being fit, and I looked after myself, and my diet was good. And I thought, barring serious injury, there's no reason why I can't keep playing. But the opportunity to step into the manager seat at Alloa, 8 years ago now, was too big a chance for me to turn down. I was still playing at the time, but I didn't want that chance to pass me by, because you just never know when you might get the opportunity again. And I think, again, just a great place for me to start at a really well-run part-time club here in Scotland. And from there, I've been able to progress my career. Delighted to be manager of Dundee United now at the moment. We've had a good start to the campaign. We're unbeaten in the last 8 games. We've got a quarter final of a cup to look forward to. So at the moment, things are ticking along nicely. But as we know, there's ups and downs in football, and we know that we're going to have some challenging periods throughout the course of the season. But I feel we're well equipped to handle those difficult moments when they come. And as you said, I am, in terms of a manager, still relatively young at 42. Although when you look at my wrinkles and my grey hair and my grey beard, I know I look about 62, but I am still only 42, believe it or not. And I've still got ambition. I've got great ambitions. I want to stay here at United for a number of years and try and build something. I think we're at the early stages of a really important project in the club's, current time. But of course, I've got ambitions of trying to move on to different challenges as well, whether it's in this country or further afield. We'll wait and see what happens. But I'll need to get the success here at United first and foremost, and to ensure that those opportunities do come up in the future.